Hi everyone, how are you Scooby-Doo doing? This is the 6th episode of my podcast. We will be discussing the 6th episode of the What's New Scooby-Doo series, which is Riva Ras Regas. This is season 1, episode 6. I liked this episode because of the fact there was a magician, and I thought magicians and magic were cool when I was younger. I also liked the cat in this episode, it was cute. I'll be talking about this episode and other things I noticed about the Scooby-Doo series that hopefully you will find interesting as well. You should give this episode a watch if you haven't already, and if you have, you can always rewatch it. I've had a question from CJ who asks, what is your best piece of Scooby-Doo music and why? First of all, this is a great question, especially the amount of times I talk about the music in each episode, so thank you for asking this question. I love getting questions from my listeners, so if anyone else has a question, feel free to contact me and ask. The ways you can contact me are at the end of this podcast. This is a really tough one to answer because a lot of the pieces of music don't have names, so I will mention the episode or film that has the music I like in it. I will say that any of the Hex Girls songs are definitely one of my favourite songs as a whole. The amount of times I go on about the What's New Scooby-Doo theme, I've got to mention this as one of my favourite songs too, because it's amazing. As for a piece of Scooby-Doo music, it's hard because they don't have names as far as we know, and they're also amazing. I would have to pick the pieces of music in the Monster of Mexico film, because if I could, I would pick all the music in What's New Scooby-Doo, and I can't really do that. I hope that answered your question, and I didn't ramble as much as I think I did answering it. This episode on my DVD has started off with the opening theme again. I'm sure no one else is that bothered, but I'm documenting it for my own curiosity to see if it changes back to the opening scene, then theme, or not. Also, whether this is my DVD or if it's an actual change the show took. In the opening scene, we see Nancy Chang with a cameraman recording a magician who we will find out later is called Rufus Raucous, with his assistant Philidia Flanders. Nancy tells viewers that Rufus has made the city of Pacoima, California, disappear to being encased for a week in a giant cube of gelatin, and that Rufus has made magic crazy fresh for a new generation of fans. As Nancy is telling the viewers this, we can see that Rufus is being helped by his assistant, putting a straitjacket on him. He is then strapped using metal onto a wheel of misfortune. Nancy explains to the viewers that he is going to try to escape from the Las Vegas hotel, which is about to be demolished by a wrecking ball. We then see Nancy, her cameraman, and Philidia run out from the hotel. Once they're out of the hotel, the wrecking ball knocks down the hotel. The guy demolishing the hotel gets the wrecking ball stuck and abandons the machine before it falls into the hotel, causing the whole thing to collapse. Nancy announces that Rufus is still inside. She also says this is horrible and tells the cameraman to stop the camera, so we presume he isn't still alive. This is our opening scene. It's interesting, we aren't introduced to a monster or a villain in the opening scene as we normally do. We also see a supporting character, Nancy Chang, from the first episode, There's No Creature Like the Snow Creature. This opening scene keeps you guessing. There was no monster to kind of signal what the gang would be investigating. There's no clues in this opening scene at the moment, but I'm sure it will become clear to us soon. After the opening scene, we start off seeing a sign which says, "Welcome to fabulous Las Vegas, Nevada." It's a very bright and well-lit sign. I'm pretty sure you wouldn't be able to miss it even if you tried. I didn't realise that it was a real sign at first, but it's a real sign in Las Vegas, Nevada, which just shows the amazing detail that the animators go into for the show. We see the Mystery Machine drive past the sign, with Fred telling the gang that they're in Las Vegas, Nevada. Velma mentions that they get to see the Eiffel Tower, the Venice Canals, and ancient Rome without going to Europe. Shaggy, however, mentions that he's never seen so many all-you-can-eat buffets, which, I mean, it's not a surprise that's what Shaggy is thinking of first. Daphne notices all the shops as they drive past excitedly. Velma also mentions that there's a world-class art collection and a Broadway-style theatre. Shaggy notices that Rats the Musical is currently playing at the theatre. This is obviously a play on Cats the Musical, which is a popular musical in the real world. Fred adds that he's heard Vegas has some of the best Elvis impersonators in the world, and then gives an interesting impression of Elvis with Daphne's sunglasses on. Daphne takes them from him, complaining that they were her sunglasses. Fred replies that he can't do his impression without them. Daphne then breaks them, I think probably on purpose so he doesn't do another impression. She blames the fact they're fragile imported sunglasses as the reason they broke, but we saw her break them in half. I don't blame her, sometimes you need to do what you need to do. Velma interjects by pointing out that she can see their destination, Newark. Fred mentions it's Las Vegas's first New Jersey themed resort. Velma adds that she's guessing it's their only New Jersey themed resort. Daphne excitedly adds that also the site of the biggest concert event of the year. We see a sign that says Lindsay Pagano in concert with Fate's Fools, which must be the biggest concert event of the year. Daphne confirms that when she says that it's teen pop sensation Lindsay Pagano's headlining debut. As they get out of the mystery machine, Daphne spins around as she says they also have backstage passes for it. Fred mentions thanks to Shaggy and Scooby. He says that they must have really wanted to go backstage and meet Lindsay. Shaggy replies that they really wanted to go backstage and eat the food. The gang are greeted at the entrance of the concert theatre by a man. He mentions they must be the radio contest winners, which explains how and why they have backstage passes and are going to this concert. I'm not sure if the previous Scooby-Doo series had radio contests, but I don't remember any, so this is definitely a way we see modern technology used more frequently, and also seen to have various different uses. We find out the man that greets the gang is called Del Stone, and that he actually runs the building. Fred asks Mr. Stone about the theme, New Jersey, and what made him pick it for the resort. Del Stone replies that someone else already got a pirate ship hotel, so they ended up going with their second option, which was the New Jersey theme. Fred says that makes sense, but Stone replies that it was actually a joke. He looks a little defeated when he mentions this. Del Stone takes the gang on a tour of the theatre. Stone tells the gang that everything in the theatre is state-of-the-art. Velma notices the name of the theatre, which is the spectacular Spackle Dome. Stone answers that it's corporate sponsorship, and that actually Spackle is one of Newark's biggest exports. Fred laughs, and thinking he was telling a joke after he missed the last one, tells Stone that it was a good one. Stone looks a bit confused as he tells Fred that it wasn't actually a joke. Stone informs them that they try their best to stick with the Newark theme. We see a black cat appear behind Stone's legs, and Shaggy asks if the cat is part of the theme. Scooby chases the cat around a statue of Rufus Raucous. Scooby gets faster as he chases the cat until they're a blur. He finally stops and we see that the cat has disappeared. Daphne points out that the cat seems to have disappeared under the statue. Shaggy adds that it's a floating statue. Velma explains to them that it's the statue of the late Rufus Raucous. His signature trick was levitating when he was alive, which is why the statue is levitating. Stone mentions to them that Rufus was the greatest showman since Elvis. Fred, of course, gets starstruck by the fact Stone knew Elvis. Stone goes on to mention that Rufus was actually supposed to be the main attraction at the Spackle Dome before he died. The theatre was actually designed to be used for his show. Stone tells the gang to go watch the rehearsal because he has to talk to a maintenance man about this vanishing cat. Shaggy mentions to Scooby that disappearing black cats and spooky dead magicians means that their luck probably couldn't get any worse, but I'm not sure they should tempt that. Just after saying that, the statue of Rufus Raucous's eyes turn red and start glowing, causing Scooby and Shaggy to run off. At the rehearsal, we can see on stage a huge sphinx behind two girls dressed in a red long-sleeved crop top with a white collar and a white skirt with red tights and white high boots. There's a girl in the middle who is singing and wearing a red top with a furry white jacket over the top with blue jeans with a belt and black boots underneath the trousers. We will find out that this is Lindsay Pagano. We see the three girls dance in unison as Lindsay Pagano sings. They're practicing their routine for her headlining debut. We can then see, while they're practicing, the gang are watching and dancing along. I think this theatre in itself is a good example of seeing more modern technology in this series, and there will be so many more examples I know I'm going to bring up, but currently I wanted to mention the screens that show Lindsay on them behind her, following her around the stage, and also the fact that she has a wireless microphone so she's able to sing and dance at the same time. I like the subtle ways they add in modern technology without you feeling like it's forced or different. The gang can't enjoy themselves for too long though, because all of a sudden you can hear feedback from the microphones, causing the backup singers and Lindsay to clutch their ears, and a voice is saying, "Get out." The screens then change to show what looks like Rufus Raucous wearing what he wore for his magic act. Shaggy thinks it's part of the show, but the fireballs coming out of the eyes on the screen say otherwise. The ghost of Rufus Raucous, which is what we are going to call this villain, doesn't seem to be a fan of Lindsay Pagano at all, and shoots fireballs towards the ropes holding up a wooden boat. It looks like it's going to fall on her, when Fred pushes her out of the way just in time. Daphne says it must be Rufus Raucous's ghost. Lindsay seems a little apprehensive, not really sure that it's a ghost. Fred then introduces the gang to her and explains they're the lucky contest winners. Lindsay says that actually she's the lucky one because Fred saved her. We then hear Daphne scream. Shaggy and Scooby hide, thinking that the ghost is back. We see that instead of the ghost of Rufus Raucous, it is in fact Fate's Fool, a boy band of 3 men, Flapjack, B-Ball and Timmy. Lindsay explains that they are her opening act. I'm not quite sure what they say back to them because it's a lot of slang and apparently I'm not down with the kids enough to understand what they're trying to say. Velma seems to agree with me because she replies, "What did he say?" One of the members of Fate's Fool decides to speak normally and say that they're making too much noise and they're trying to get rest to be ready for the show. Lindsay rather sarcastically replies that she'll try to keep it down the next time a ghost tries to kill her. The members of Fate's Fool make fun of her. Stone runs to the stage to make sure everyone's alright. He mentions he heard there's been a disruption. Fate's Fool say that Lindsay is scared of the ghost and then try and get themselves to be the headline instead. How rude are these guys? The audacity. They might be Daphne's favourite boy band, but I'm not keen. Lindsay puts Flapjack in his place and tells him that a ghost won't stop her from her first headlining gig in Vegas. Stone replies that there's not going to be any show because he's going to be cancelling it until they find out what's going on and who's responsible for it. Lindsay is understandably upset, but Fred comes to her rescue again and mentions that they solve mysteries and can help her. Lindsay hugs Fred and says he's generous and brave. I mean, he's not the only one solving the mysteries here, but apparently he's going to get the credit. Scooby and Shaggy come out from under a table and see a door which says Green Room on it. Shaggy thinks that's where they keep salads and vegetables. They open the door only to find the ghost of Rufus Raucous behind it. Scooby and Shaggy run away with the ghost following them, flying in the air. They get to a dead end and the ghost manages to get 2 pieces of cord from the wall to wrap around Scooby and Shaggy, trapping them up high in the air like they're floating. The ghost then disappeared in a flash of smoke. Fred, Daphne, Velma and Lindsay come through the smoke and ask Scooby and Shaggy what's up, which is quite funny because Shaggy replies, "We are." Literally, they are up in the air. Shaggy explains that the ghost had brought the cords to life. Velma inspects the cables to see that they're leaking water, which she finds very interesting. To be fair, I think that's quite interesting too. Not what I would expect from a normal cable. I wonder what it means. After Daphne and Fred manage to get Shaggy and Scooby down and untied, Shaggy mentions that the ghost was hovering by the rack of costumes. Scooby tries to show the gang what the ghost was doing, but the tag on his collar sticks to the ground. Fred realises that the floor is magnetised, which is why Scooby's metal tag on his collar would become stuck to the floor. Velma also mentions that the cables that tied up Scooby and Shaggy are hydraulic. Hydraulic means that it's operated by water pressure. In this case, the water pressure caused the cables to move and tie up Scooby and Shaggy. Velma also reminds us that the theatre was designed for Rufus Raucous, which means that illusions like these are more than likely built in. Daphne looks through the rack of clothes, and while moving a dress, the mask falls out from between it. Daphne says that whoever was wearing the mask must have got rid of it there so they could slip out unnoticed. Velma adds that they could also have done it to blend in with the people inside. Daphne hints towards the Fate's Fools because they tried to steal the spotlight from her good friend Lindsay, who lets her borrow clothes. I mean, a girl's gotta try, especially when the clothes are cute. Lindsay tells her that she could go for it because she has doubles of the costumes anyway. Fred wonders aloud about Del Stone, but Shaggy questions why Stone would want to sabotage his own theatre. Lindsay mentions that Stone doesn't own the theatre and that he's just the manager. He was out of money and sold the theatre to a big corporation. Velma wonders if maybe he wants to destroy the hotel because of bitterness. Fred suggests they split up and look for clues. In an odd twist, Fred decides to split up with Scooby and Shaggy to go see what Stone is up to. Daphne decides that if Fred, Shaggy and Scooby are going to check out Stone, then Lindsay, Velma and herself can go check out the shops. We see Stone in a dressing gown coming out of a room that has private on the door, looking very suspicious and looking around to make sure no one is there, and sneaking off only to come face to face with Fred, Scooby and Shaggy, with their arms crossed looking stern. Stone then runs away with Fred, Scooby and Shaggy chasing after him. He tries to hide from them in the steam room. As Stone is wearing glasses and they're fogged up in the steam room, he can't tell who's in the steam room, especially that Fred, Scooby and Shaggy are in the steam room. Fred tells Shaggy and Scooby that he's going to disguise his voice and see if they can get any information out of him. You can see where this is going. Fred does his Elvis impression. Not that anyone was surprised he chose that impression, although Stone thinks he's talking to Engelbert Humperdinck. Stone tells Fred that Vegas has changed and that he has to sneak away just to go to the steam room. Fred, still doing his impression, asks Stone if he knows anything about the ghost. Stone replies that there's no ghost because Rufus Raucous isn't dead. Fred accidentally slips into his real voice in shock that Rufus isn't dead, and Stone asks who it is before cleaning his glasses using Scooby's tail. Stone tells them dogs aren't allowed in here, and also nosy kids aren't allowed either. Stone tells Fred his Engelbert Humperdinck impression stunk, but Stone thought it was him, so it can't be that bad. If anyone's wondering, Engelbert Humperdinck is a colleague of Dale Stone and actually does sound a little bit like Elvis, hence the confusion. The gang all meet up together again. Fred asks if the girls have found anything. Velma shows Fred what she got, another orange turtleneck, and Daphne holds up shopping bags. Fred notices Rufus Raucous' assistant, Philidia Flanders, on stage. We see Philidia introduce Mr. Wacky Pants. Mr. Wacky Pants makes a joke about his ex-wife. It's not very funny. We see Scooby and Shaggy get a plate of spaghetti and sauce, each placed in front of them. Before they get a chance to eat it, Mr. Wacky Pants picks them as his two volunteers. Well, unwilling really, rather than volunteers. Mr. Wacky Pants is doing the human puzzle box. Once Scooby and Shaggy are inside the box, he moves the boxes and opens them all to show Scooby and Shaggy inside and still intact. The trick didn't go to plan, and he mentions that he only just got this trick. It doesn't look good. Philidia ends up helping him and executes the human puzzle box perfectly and opens the boxes to show Scooby and Shaggy's body parts in different boxes. The gang go to Philidia's dressing room to ask her some questions. She tells them that Rufus would never fake his death and leave the spotlight because he loved magic too much. She also mentions that Rufus wouldn't have left her to be stuck making a living with Mr. Wacky Pants if he was still alive. Mr. Wacky Pants walks in and seems really rude. He also calls them kooks, who think Rufus is still alive. Philidia explains that Mr. Wacky Pants is jealous because Rufus changed the game for magic and caused Mr. Wacky Pants to go out of fashion. Philidia gives the gang footage of Rufus's last stunt. I know I keep going on about technology in the What's New Scooby-Doo series, but she had some of the footage in a tape. It looks like a VHS. The What's New Scooby-Doo series aired from 2002 to 2006, and by 2006 the VHS had pretty much died out and everyone started using DVDs. So, fun fact, Velma plays the footage on her laptop. I'm not quite sure how, as laptops don't have a VHS slot, but I'm gonna let that one go for the sake of story progression, but a DVD would have been a better idea to use. As Velma plays the footage, Lindsay asks her to go back a bit. We see a white line around the picture of rubble that fell. Velma explains to Shaggy that it's a line that is normally seen around computer-generated effects. Lindsay tells them that it's sometimes seen in music videos. Daphne wonders aloud if that means the concrete falling down isn't real. Velma tells them that if it's a layer onto the original video, then she should be able to move it away. She manages to get rid of the fake concrete rubble. We see Rufus get himself off the wheel of misfortune and jump through a trapdoor underneath. Daphne realises that it must have been pre-recorded before the building came down and then spliced into the broadcast to make it look like it was happening live. Fred mentions that the cat that disappeared earlier underneath the statue and suggests that maybe the trapdoor is there. We then see Fred, Scooby and Shaggy pushing the statue, which looks really heavy, and sure enough, there's a trapdoor that leads to a tunnel underneath. As they're walking along the tunnel, they hear a noise that scares them. We see Daphne grab Fred, but it's just Rufus's cat. Scooby runs after the cat and the gang follow behind. The cat and Scooby go through a hole in a metal door. The gang go through the door to see some sort of room. Shaggy bumps into a mannequin of the Great Houdini, which was hanging from the ceiling. Fred goes to a desk and mentions all this cool old magic stuff. They hear a voice say, "Look with your eyes, not your hands, because they're priceless." It turns out to be Rufus Raucous. Not the ghost of, but the real deal in the flesh right in front of them. That doesn't stop Scooby and Shaggy from hiding though. Rufus's cat jumps into his arms and Rufus cuddles his adorable cat. Rufus recognises Lindsay Pagano and says, "Right on." Daphne questions that he's not trying to stop Lindsay from performing in his theatre. Rufus says that it's not a theatre, it's a fun house, and he's not trying to stop Lindsay from performing. In fact, he's moved away from all that type of magic, and is working on more street art and has some tricks currently in the works. As he tells the gang and Lindsay about this, we see his cat walk off his arm and stay in midair. Shaggy asks if he's the real Rufus Raucous, then who's that? We see the ghost of Rufus Raucous floating up high in the room, throwing fireballs at them. We see Rufus's cat actually wave at the ghost of Rufus Raucous, which seems suspicious. Rufus gets a cloth and puts it over them. The ghost blasts it with fire, but we see the gang, along with Rufus and Lindsay, have escaped. The ghost tries to stop them again, and Rufus lets go of half a dozen doves, which causes the ghost to fly away. We see the ghost try and get Scooby and Shaggy at the all-you-can-eat buffet at the casino and then ends up chasing them to a skydiving room. We then see Mr. Wacky Pants on stage doing his act. Rufus seems in shock that Philidia is now working for Mr. Wacky Pants and mentions that he was always after Rufus's secret. Velma mentions that with Philidia as his assistant he may finally have them. Daphne notices that he doesn't seem to use them if he does have them. Lindsay wonders if maybe he's saving them for a surprise appearance at the Spackle Dome. Fred decides that the only way to find out is to set a trap. He asks Rufus if he's up for it. Rufus decides if there's a chance he can save Philidia from Mr. Wacky Pants, then Fred can count him in. We see the billboard sign with Lindsay Pagano as the headlining act, but underneath it, instead of Fate's Fool as the supporting act, it's been replaced with Rufus Raucous. We see Nancy Chang reporting that Rufus Raucous, the magician the world watched perish on this site, will return tonight, seemingly from the dead. She questions if this is even real. One thing she does know is that she reported it first. We see Daphne and Lindsay behind the stage and Velma behind a screen. Velma tells them that she's not coming out. Rufus tries to reassure her and tells her to just follow his lead and she'll be fine. Rufus is announced on stage and the curtains come up to see Rufus with his mask on and the crowd boos. He tells them that he doesn't blame them for doubting him. However, he's going to prove it the only way he knows how, by astounding the audience with only a deck of cards and his bare hands. We see Velma pushed onto stage by Daphne, and we can see Velma is wearing a pink assistant's costume which looks more like a pink ballerina's tutu. She gives Rufus the deck of cards and he drops them on the floor. He asks her nicely if she'd pick up the cards for him. He shows the audience he has nothing up his sleeve. We then see another hand come out from his sleeve towards Velma, who is picking up the cards. Rufus mentions that he said he'd only be using his bare hands. The hand picks the cards up and moves off, but we see another hand try and take Velma's shoe. Rufus asks Velma to lend him a hand, but she tells him no way because these hands are mine, which makes the audience laugh. All the hands return to Rufus and we see just one hand and it removes his mask. He tells the audience there's a new face in magic and it's his. We then see the ghost of Rufus Raucous show up on top of the Sphinx and call Rufus an imposter. Daphne uses her compact mirror to shine a light in the ghost's face. Fred throws a net to capture the ghost, but it ends up missing the ghost and getting the real Rufus Raucous. The ghost manages to make the Sphinx move and it tries to squash Rufus, but Fred pulls up the net. Shaggy and Scooby run off, but Scooby's collar gets stuck to the ground. Velma notices and changes the magnetic polarity on the stage. This frees Scooby's tag on his collar and then brings the ghost of Rufus Raucous straight down so that they are stuck to the floor. Fred loses his grip on the rope and falls into the magic cabinet. Shaggy notices that the ghost is stuck to the floor, and Velma explains that the ghost has magnets in their shoes, which they use to levitate. Shaggy hears Fred trapped in the magic cabinet and opens the door to see no one's in there. He then closes the door, which causes Fred to shout out. Shaggy opens the door again and Fred comes out of the magic cabinet. Fred says it's time to bring the curtain down on Mr. Wacky Pants' career, but I'm not so sure. The ghost looks a lot slimmer than Mr. Wacky Pants. Who do you think it is? What do you think their motive is? Well, we're about to find out because Fred removes the mask to reveal Philidia Flanders. Lindsay points out that's why the ghost knew all of Rufus's tricks. Velma explains that while Mr. Wacky Pants seemed like an obvious suspect, He was actually really bad at magic. He couldn't even do a simple trick. Velma adds that the biggest clue to this mystery was the fact that Rufus's cat wasn't afraid of the ghost, meaning the ghost had to be someone who was close to Rufus. So we've got the who, now we need the why. Validia explains that when Rufus disappeared, she was supposed to step into the spotlight. She knew all his tricks and she could have made loads of money, but Stone wouldn't let her. Fred realises that she was trying to ruin Stone. Validia mentions she would have gotten away with it if it weren't for you meddling kids. The police remove her from her shoes, and before they take her away, Fred tells her that she'll have plenty of time to develop her act now. Shaggy adds as long as she doesn't try an escape trick. They all laugh while Validia is taken away. We see Lindsay Pagano on stage singing for her headlining debut. To the side of the stage behind the curtain, Stone thanks the gang for solving the mystery and also luring Rufus out of retirement. He explains that Rufus had agreed to play at the Spackle Dome a few times a year, but on Rufus's terms. Scooby and Shaggy find some backstage food finally. There's 2 bowls full of fruit taller than a person. Scooby and Shaggy each jump into one of the bowls of fruit. Lindsay motions for Fred, Daphne and Velma to join her on stage. Lindsay pulls Fred on stage while her backup singers, who have 2 bowls of fruit on their heads, push Daphne and Velma onto stage. We see the gang dance on stage before Shaggy and Scooby pop their heads out of the fruit, and Daphne points them out. The gang laugh and Scooby happily eats fruit before saying his catchphrase, Scooby-Dooby-Doo. Okay, so this was the 6th episode of What's New Scooby-Doo. My best bit was seeing how the ghosts managed to do their magic bits. For example, the hydraulic cables being able to tie up Scooby and Shaggy, and also the magnetic field making the ghost float, but also causing Scooby's tag on his collar to be stuck to the floor. Also, the computer-generated imagery showing concrete falling down and actually seeing it removed and what actually happened was really interesting. I love seeing the real Rufus Raucous's magic as well. It was really cool. The worst bit was, I think, at the beginning when the building collapsed and we think that Rufus has been killed, especially Nancy Chang's reaction. It just seemed like a genuine worry from Nancy, and the panic made you think the worst had happened. Also, I did not like Fate's Fall. Like, why were they even here? Just to give us another suspect for the ghosts? They really didn't serve a purpose, but mainly they were huge jerks. This is mainly an issue with the characters themselves, though, nothing against the writers. The funniest bit was when Fred did his Elvis impression and Daphne takes back her sunglasses. When Fred says he can't do his Elvis impression without them, Daphne breaks them so he can't do any more impressions. Also, his impression in the steam room was funny too. You can see the tape on the sunglasses showing Fred obviously fixed them after Daphne broke them. My favourite supporting character for this episode was Rufus's cat. Just kidding, although the cat was so cute. It's actually Rufus Raucous. He just seemed really nice, and when he meets Lindsay, he's so nice to her too, and seems to like her as a musician. Also, he seemed happy to help the gang to unmask the ghost. He seemed concerned that Validia was working with Mr. Wacky Pants and wanted to actively help her, even if she did end up being the ghost. This is the end of my 6th podcast. Thank you for listening. I wonder if you thought the same as my best, worst and funniest bits. Was Rufus Raucous your favourite supporting character this episode? Whether you agreed or disagreed, I'd love to know your thoughts about this episode, and I may even feature them in my next episode. The next episode will be Season 1, Episode 7, Roller Coaster Ride, so get ready to listen to the next podcast. Just to let everyone know that there is a link in any of the episode descriptions to the transcript for that particular episode, or you can just go to my website and go to the blog page and pick the episode you want. If you want to ask any questions or even just mention anything you liked about this episode, you can go to my website, meddlingpodcasts.com. That's meddlingpodcasts.com, or you can email me at feedback@meddlingpodcasts.com. I'd love to hear any of your thoughts about Scooby-Doo, whether it's this episode, another episode, or Scooby-Doo in general. Thanks for listening and stay groovy!